We are back again with On the Money Line, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm your host Newsome, and we're back at the Apex in Vegas here for UFC Vegas 38. This card is a little underwhelming when you consider what we were gifted last weekend at UFC 266, but the main event here should be super fun with Thiago Santos versus Johnny Walker, two big, powerful and athletic light heavyweights who can end any fight in a flash. I'm not quite sure we needed 5 rounds scheduled, but like I said, it'll be fun for as long as it lasts. Niko versus Cowboy Oliveira definitely needs a special mention too, as that fight should be absolutely fireworks from start to finish. That's my prediction for the fight of the night. But just before we get into the breakdowns, as always, there's a few things to mention in regards to MMA Play 365. The last event was a really good event from a betting perspective. The money back guarantee dog of the week was the first fight up as Jonathan Pierce choked out Omar Morales. We had our biggest bet of the night on Alexander Volkanovski, which unfortunately ended up coming with its sweats, but at the same time cashed relatively easily too. And we also had a side piece parlay with Curtis Blades and Merab Dvalishvili, which cashed too. And finally, the Fun Gamblers section had one pre-made parlay that won, along with 9 out of the 12 parlay piece options winning too. Remember, we have multiple packages on the MMA Play 365 website for all the UFC betting advice and DraftKings FanDuel advice that you'll ever need. We also have various subscription lengths and options too, so to see our full service list, please go and visit MMAplay365.com for more information or to sign up today. And let's go, let's break down some fights in the main event in the UFC light heavyweight division. We've got Thiago Santos versus Johnny Walker. Santos is currently the minus 170 favourite, the comeback on Walker, the plus 150 underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I do think the value sits with the underdog in Johnny Walker at plus 150. I think it's a volatile fight, which I'll talk about soon. And because of that, I do feel that the plus money side is the value side. And of course, I'd say the same if Thiago Santos was sitting at plus money as well. As for where the betting lines move throughout fight week, I think we're going to see some fluctuation here. I think we are going to see Johnny Walker money coming in. He might go down to plus 135, plus 140. But I do feel that if Thiago Santos does start getting low enough on that betting line, that he will just have money coming back on him naturally. And I think come fight night on Saturday night, I don't think the betting lines are going to close too far off from where they're at right about now. But as for how this fight plays out, like I said, I think it's a volatile fight. Both fighters are powerful, they're both aggressive, they can both end a night in an absolute blink of an eye, a flash, an instant. So both fighters are going to have to be very cautious, but that's the thing, I don't think both fighters are going to be very cautious at all. I think both fighters are going to go in there looking for that early finish, specifically Johnny Walker as well, because I do think that if this fight gets into round 3, or if we do see a round 4 or a round 5, you have to favour Thiago Santos from what we've seen at that moment deep into that fight, because we have seen Johnny Walker tire now. One thing to mention around Johnny Walker's cardio, the last time we saw him really gasp badly was against Nikita Krylov, but Krylov was wrestling hard, he was forcing him to grapple, and Johnny Walker is naturally a striker, a dynamic striker, and you see it all the time. Once a fighter makes a striker wrestle and grapple, they just don't have the cardio to wrestle and grapple. And listen, Krylov was getting tired as well, but Johnny Walker, like I said, he was just made to fight in an area where he's not very comfortable, especially from a cardio perspective. Now, I see this fight playing out on the feet for the most part. I think the fight's won and lost on the feet, so I'm not totally convinced that if this fight does go deep that Johnny Walker's going to be completely gassed. However, I do have more faith in Thiago Santos' gas tank and his pacing, so if the fight does go deep, I favour Santos for sure. But the thing is, I don't think this fight gets out of round 2. I think this fight ends within 10 minutes. I think one of these fighters is going to find that shot that puts the other one down. And again, you could almost call this a coin flip in my opinion from that perspective. If you believe this fight's going to go deep and you believe that we are going to see a 3rd, a 4th and a 5th round, then you're going to have to favour Thiago Santos. I completely get that. But one of the reasons, even though it's kind of a coin flip, I do side with Johnny Walker in this fight is because Johnny Walker's young. He's still going to be improving and developing now. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's the prospect that I was saying he was, last year or a couple of years ago. I was wrong about that. I don't mind holding my hands up when I'm wrong. I definitely didn't read that right in regards to how hyped Johnny Walker was, but I do still think that he's explosive. I do still think he's an athletic specimen, and I do still think he's got explosive power as well. And with Thiago Santos, after he had that double knee surgery, and I'm pretty sure one of those knees needed to be operated on a second time as well. I could be wrong about that. I might be thinking of another fighter, but he definitely had operations on both knees, surgeries on both knees after that John Jones fight. And he just looks a little bit slower, a little bit more hesitant. That movement doesn't seem to be quite there as what it was prior to that. Against Glover Teixeira, he couldn't capitalise on rocking Teixeira and hurting him badly in that first round. And then against Alexander Rakic in his last fight, again, he just didn't have that explosive nature about him. And it ended up being a bit of a tit-for-tat fight, which Alexander Rakic won on the scorecard. The fight wasn't anywhere near as wild as what people thought it was going to be. And I just wonder if Thiago Santos has just lost a step in regards to his style and how he likes to fight through those surgeries. Whereas I know Johnny Walker's going to be fresh, he's going to be ready for this fight, ready to bounce back, and he's definitely going to have a speed advantage in my opinion. It's just with Johnny Walker, the durability issues are kind of a thing. With Thiago Santos, you don't get those kind of durability issues, but I do think that speed, movement, and the dynamic ability of Johnny Walker is what's going to be the difference in this fight. Like I said, I think the fight ends within 10 minutes. I think it's actually going to be Johnny Walker that catches Thiago Santos, and ultimately that's why I'm picking Johnny Walker to win this fight. And in the next fight, in the co-main event, we've got Kevin Holland versus Kyle Daukaus. Kevin Holland is currently the -150 favourite. The comeback on Daukaus at +130 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, reluctantly I do think that Kevin Holland is the value side at -150. I think if it wasn't for a couple of his previous fights, I think he could be a bigger favourite in this spot, and obviously I'll talk about that soon. But as the line sits right now, I do think that Kevin Holland is the value side. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, I do think it moves a little bit in the favour of Kevin Holland in regards to widening. I think Kevin Holland will close this fight roughly around -160, -170, potentially up to -175, but if it gets wider than that, just going back to the value, I think the value would slit in to the path of Kyle Daukaus. Now, as for how this fight plays out, like I said, reluctantly I'm saying that Kevin Holland is the value side here. It depends what Kevin Holland we see. If we see the Kevin Holland that's playful, the Kevin Holland that doesn't look like he's taking the fight seriously, then we could see Kyle Daukaus really capitalise on his stylistic advantages in this fight and potentially even get Kevin Holland out. And those stylistic advantages that Daukaus holds is in the grappling. But the problem with Daukaus, especially in this fight, is to get the fight on the mat in the grappling realm, he's got to be able to wrestle Kevin Holland to take him down. And that's where I think he's going to come a little unstuck, because Kyle Daukaus isn't a bad wrestler. He does tend to use more double underhooks, body locks, trips, and try to drag his opponent down to the mat, opposed to looking for single legs and double legs. But Kevin Holland's takedown defense against that type of fighter isn't too bad. We saw that against Brendan Allen. Yes, he was taken down in that fight, but Brendan Allen had to work for those takedowns to get Holland down, whereas I don't think Daukaus is as good of a takedown artist as Brendan Allen, so I think he's going to have more difficulties in my opinion. Now, if this is a Derek Brunson looking for a single leg, a double leg, and looking for that traditional wrestling style against Holland, then yes, I think Holland can be got at, but I think Kyle Daukaus is going to have problems trying to take Holland down. And if Holland is really serious about this fight, and he is taking it very seriously, he comes out and performs to the best of his ability, then I think he'll be able to keep this fight vertical without too many issues. I'm not saying he can't be taken down, but I don't think he's going to be taken down to the level he needs to be taken down for Daukaus to win this fight, again, if he's on his game. Now, Holland is the better striker on the feet, in my opinion. Daukaus, again, he's not a bad striker. Daukaus is a really well-rounded fighter, in my opinion. I like Daukaus quite a lot, but on the feet, I think Kevin Holland's a little bit more elusive. He's a little bit quicker. He's got more of a variety of attacks with his punches, with his kicks. He strings together combinations really well, and he's got good distance management with really good durability and a good chin as well. So it's really difficult to lay something on Kevin Holland and try and knock him out. And if this fight does play out on the feet for the most part, which I do anticipate this fight being won and lost on the feet, I just have to favour Kevin Holland. But again, it all depends on what Kevin Holland we see inside the cage. If Kevin Holland comes into this level-headed and just really on his game, then I really don't see Kyle Daukaus winning the fight, if I'm being honest. And I think Holland will look closer to a -200, 220 favourite opposed to the minus 150. But like I say, if Daukaus comes into this fight and finds himself in front of a Holland that is playful and isn't looking like he's taking it too seriously, I think Daukaus can capitalise, take him down and potentially submit him. But I do feel that the biggest stylistic advantages lie with Kevin Holland on the feet, where he's a better striker, more elusive, more dynamic, faster, better movement, more volume, and it's for those reasons I'm picking Kevin Holland to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got my favourite fight on the card. We've got Niko Price versus Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Niko Price is currently the minus 152 favourite. The comeback on Oliveira at plus 132 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I do think the value sits just with Niko Price as the slight favourite at minus 152. I think if this betting line got up to minus 165, minus 170, maybe even minus 175, I do think you might see the value slightly starting to slide over to Alex Cowboy Oliveira's side, but right now I think the value sits with the favourite in Niko Price. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, I do actually think that the line widens a little bit here. The current trend is that money on Niko Price. He was down at minus 130 just a couple of days ago, minus 135, and he's slowly slipping to around minus 150 anywhere. I think that does continue to roughly the minus 165, minus 170 line, but then I do think we'll see Alex Oliveira bets coming back in, closing the line up to roughly where it's sitting right about now, which is where I think the betting line will close come fight night on Saturday night. Now, as for how this fight plays out, Alex Oliveira's got to be spoken about first. He's a really interesting character inside the cage as a fighter, and he's ultimately got two sides to him in his fights. So the fights that he does really well in is where he can be the aggressor, he can be the one pushing forward, dictating the pace and the range of the fight, and ultimately bullying his opponent inside the cage. Those fights where Alex Oliveira can have the upper hand in those areas are the fights where he's going to be really difficult to beat. But on the flip side, when he's not the fighter that's being the aggressor, when he's not the fighter that's dictating the pace and the pressure, when he's his opponent that's dictating the pace, the pressure, and being aggressive towards him and landing some hard shots, it's in those fights where Alex Oliveira just looks like a completely different fighter and a fighter that is easy to get at and easy to hit. And I think Alex Oliveira is going to have those type of problems in this fight because Niko Price, he's got heart for days, toughness for days, he's durable, he'll constantly walk forwards even when he's a bit tired later in fights. He only knows one way to walk, and that is forwards at his opponent. And like I said, he throws hard shots, he throws power in his shots, but he's got good boxing fundamentals as well, and he mixes his wild style with these fundamentals inside the cage whilst the fight's on the feet. He'll mix things up between hard low kicks as well, which he'll throw inside low kicks, outside low kicks, and like I said, he always steps on the gas pedal. He'll always be pushing forwards and looking to put it on his opponent no matter who's in front of him. He was even doing it against killers like Vicente Luque. So Niko Price here, I think, has got a fight ahead of him that's going to be much simpler than his last few losses against the likes of Vicente Luque and your Jeff Neals of the world. I think he's going to be able to get at Cowboy Oliveira now. What Oliveira needs to do in this fight is close the distance, tie up with him, and try and push Niko Price back to the cage and look for takedowns. And I think that's Oliveira's path to victory and his best path to victory, because whilst he's out on the feet in open space, I think Niko Price is going to be a real nightmare for him, and I think Oliveira's going to get hit with some really hard shots early in that first round, especially early in that first round. But if Oliveira can tie up with Price, it takes that away from him. But the thing is, Oliveira, I'm not sure how much you can trust his gas tank and if he's overly wrestling Price, because Price is a big fighter in that welterweight division. He's strong, he's physical, so it's not going to be easy to take him down. And with, like I say, Oliveira's gas tank a little bit untrustworthy if he is trying to physically drag him down to the mat, because again, that's what Oliveira does. It's not traditional wrestling takedowns that he goes to in regards to single legs and double legs. He does like to use his physical strength and his physical traits to bully his opponent and drag them down. That's going to wear on the gas tank, especially if he's not completing the takedowns. And Niko Price's jiu-jitsu isn't bad either, offensively and defensively, so if he is taken down, I think he can get back up to his feet. I just think stylistically Oliveira is going to have some problems in this fight. What Oliveira needs to do is either tie up early or just make sure he lands something hard on Niko Price to get his respect. But ultimately, I just come back to the two sides of Cowboy Oliveira. I don't think this is the side of Cowboy Oliveira that's going to be the aggressor in this fight, that's going to be able to dictate the pace and the range of the fight and bully his opponent. I think it's going to be the opposite, which brings out the second side of Oliveira, where where he can turtle up a bit against the cage, he can be hittable, and he can be got at, and I think Price enables himself to bring that second Oliveira out, which will allow Price to land volume and land hard shots on Oliveira, and it's for those reasons I am picking Niko Price to win this fight. And in the next fight, coming down to middleweight, we've got Misha Cirkunov versus Krzysztof Jotko. Jotko's currently the -152 favourite to come back on Cirkunov at +132 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I do think the value sits with the underdog in Cirkunov. From a stylistic perspective, I think the betting line should be a little bit shorter, so for that reason, I do feel the value sits with that plus money on Cirkunov's line. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, I do think the betting line is going to close up the closer we get to fight night. I'm not sure we see a pick'em, but I do think we see it get quite close. I think Jotko's going to come into this fight roughly around a -125 favourite, which will see Cirkunov around that +105, +110 betting line. Now, as for how this fight plays out, I'm just really unsure what we're going to see from Jotko, to be honest, because he is a fighter with clear technical ability, but his performance are very on-off. He's inconsistent, and he can be in these really dull, close split decision type of fights, and we've seen that against Hernandez, against Marc-Andre Barrio, and when you're looking towards the top of the division, it's those types of fights where you should be really pulling away and making it really decisive, and Jotko just doesn't do that. Obviously, there's not the hype on him like there was a few years ago when a lot of people were tipping him to be one of the best middleweights in the world. So like I said, it's just really hard to be confident that Jotko's going to come into this fight and put a really technical performance on, because it is a possibility, and if he is on his game, then he can pose a lot of problems to Cirkunov, because in my opinion, Jotko is the more technical striker, the fighter that's likely to land more volume, and like I say, just slow the fight and the pace down a little bit. Obviously, from Cirkunov's side, there's going to be takedowns, in my opinion, coming at Jotko. Jotko hasn't got bad takedown defense, so like I say, if he's really on his game, he can be able to defend the takedowns, keep the fight on the feet, and just outpoint Cirkunov to a simple decision. But like I said, I'm not convinced that that's going to happen. I think that Cirkunov coming down to middleweight is probably a good move for him. He does seem to be overbulked at light heavyweight, and I think at middleweight, he's probably going to find his division that's more suited for him. We saw that with Cannonier and so many other fighters over the years. When you actually drop back in weight, sometimes it's for the best, sometimes it's not, and you shouldn't do it, but sometimes it is for the best. Jose Aldo's another example of that. Edson Barboza was looking good before that obvious loss to Giga Chikadze coming down in weight. So I do think that coming down to middleweight is a good move for Cirkunov. I think he's going to be a little bit quicker, but he's going to be able to keep his strength. He's going to be a big middleweight, and I think if he does decide to go down a relentless wrestling route here, he is going to be able to get Jotko down, and Cirkunov on top is just nasty. He's got really good Brazilian jiu-jitsu, he's got really good ground and pound, and it's not until he faces a Brazilian jiu-jitsu someone like Glover Teixeira, for example, where he does have problems on the mat. I think against Jotko, although Jotko's not a bad grappler, I think Cirkunov will be the better grappler, and I think that will show if Cirkunov gets on top of him. But the thing is with Cirkunov, the problems that he's had previously in his UFC career is he's struggled with fighters with big knockout power, and ultimately that's got the better of him. Fighters like Ryan Spans knocked him out, Johnny Walker knocked him out, Glover Teixeira knocked him out, Volkan Ozdemir knocked him out. These fighters are finishing by KO, TKO, and again with Jotko, I just don't think he possesses that sort of power to be able to really sting and hurt Cirkunov, which does lead me to believe that Cirkunov is going to have good moments in this fight, especially with the wrestling and grappling, and ultimately it's going to be a fight where whoever's game plan and style is coming out on top is going to be the fighter that wins the fight. I know it's a little bit of a cliche, but if Jotko can keep this fight vertical, then I do think that Jotko's got every chance of just outpointing himself to, a simple decision on the scorecards. But I think if Cirkunov has his way, he's going to be able to get close to Jotko, he's going to be able to tie up with him where he's likely going to be the physical, stronger fighter, take him down to the mat and just be able to at least win 2 out of the 3 rounds with top control if he doesn't find a submission or some ground and pound along the way. I am leaning towards the fact that Cirkunov is likely going to look good down at middleweight. I think he is going to get the takedowns that he needs. I think he is going to be able to get the top control, and I think he's going to look good in doing so. So for those reasons, I'm picking Misha Cirkunov to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Aspen Lad versus Macy Chiasson. Lad is currently the -210 favourite to come back on Chiasson at +175 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I think the betting line is probably quite accurate where it is. I don't see too much value on either side. Betting Lad at -210, that comes with some concerns moments, but on the flip side, holding a Macy Chiasson ticket at plus 175, I just don't think there's too much value on either side. I think it's lined accurately. And as for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, because of what I've just said, I don't think there's going to be too many tickets on either side here. I don't think this fight is going to take a lot of action where it is. If Aspen Lad was at minus 175, then it'd be a different story. Just like if Chiasson was a plus 250 underdog, then again, that would be a different story as well. But because of where it's lined, I don't think there's going to be a lot of action. And for that reason, I don't think the line's going to move too much throughout fight week. When it comes to fight night on Saturday night, I think both fighters' betting lines are going to be sitting roughly where it's at right about now. Now, as for how this fight plays out, even though, I'm saying Aspen Lad's rightfully a 2-1 favourite in this fight, I don't think it's going to be a whitewash. I definitely think Chiasson's going to have a moments, but I think the moments that Chiasson has are going to be early in the fight. Now, I do think Chiasson's improved her cardio throughout a 3-round fight. I do think that when she was first in the UFC, people did question, is she a 1-round fighter? I don't think she is, but I do think a better work in this fight is probably going to be in that first round. I think she's going to start faster than Aspen Lad. She's going to be taller. She's going to have those physical advantages, and I think she's going to make them count again early in the fight. But I think the longer the fight goes on, the more Aspen Lad will grow into the fight, and I just think Aspen Lad's a better mixed martial artist. Lad can strike herself. She's definitely not a slouch when it comes to the striking, but I think she's going to be able to tie up with Chiasson, get a body lock around her. Because Chiasson's taller, that should make it easier for Lad to shoot in on the takedowns, and I think Lad's going to be able to get the fight down to the mat. And I don't think she needs to do it routinely and consistently either, because I think if Lad gets Chiasson down to the mat, I think Lad can hold her down there, either find a finish or just see that round out with the top control, and then she'll just have to go back to it the following round. And ultimately, that's how I see this fight playing out. I think Chiasson's going to come out aggressive early on. I think she's going to have some good moments. I think it's going to be one of those fights where if you are holding an Aspen Lad ticket, you're going to be thinking, being a bit worried early on in that first round. But once that initial onslaught subsides, I think Lad will grow into the fight. I think she will find the body locks. I think she will get the takedowns on Chiasson, and I think she will be able to do good work on top, either find a finish or just win that round with top control, rinse and repeat the following round. And like I say, either find a finish along the way or win on the judges' scorecards. I think stylistically, it slightly favours Aspen Lad, but ultimately I think Aspen Lad is just the better mixed martial artist. I'm picking Aspen Lad to win this fight. And in the next fight, we do have a short notice fight for one opponent making a UFC debut. We should have had Alexander Hernandez versus Leonardo Santos, which would have been really intriguing, but instead we do have Alexander Hernandez versus the newcomer Mike Breeden. Hernandez is currently the minus 500 favourite. The comeback on Breeden at plus 400 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, it's a bit of a horrible one this, because Alexander Hernandez at minus 500 is definitely risky, especially when you look at Mike Breeden. I don't think he's going to be a complete pushover. I don't think he's going to be a whitewash scenario for Alexander Hernandez. So I would say that Breeden might be the value side, but still plus 400 is likely going to be a ticket that loses. So again, just like Aspen Lad and Macy Chiasson a minute ago, I just don't see too much value on either side. But I do think, as for where the betting line moves, Alexander Hernandez is going to grow as a favourite, because I just think people are going to throw him in parlays expecting him to win, and what that's going to do is just naturally widen the betting line. Not too much. I think he's going to go into this fight roughly around a minus 550 favourite, maybe up to minus 600. But as for how this fight plays out, for those that are unsure what Breeden brings to the table inside the cage, Breeden's a really good boxer. He's got good combinations, he's calm, and his shot selection within the combinations are really good as well. He'll go to the body, he'll go to the head. But the issue with Breeden is he has a lot of success with his boxing, but he's got to be the one that's being the aggressor, that's pushing forwards, that's backing his opponent up against the cage. And it's in those moments where he'll really rip his combinations, and he looks really good doing so, but he's very boxing heavy. Now with Alexander Hernandez, I think Hernandez is the better mixed martial artist, the fighter with more experience, and sure, again, he's another one of those fighters where he hasn't got the hype on him now as he did a couple of years ago, but he's still a really good fighter, and I think he's a fighter that's still developing. But Alexander Hernandez mixes things up, so he'll box with Breeden. I don't think Breeden's got super scary knockout power to really trouble or worry Hernandez. I'm not saying he can't knock him out, but he just doesn't have that scary power that I think is going to make Hernandez hesitant. So I do think that Hernandez is going to box with Breeden, throw punches as he's throwing punches. But the thing is with Hernandez, he will mix in low kicks as well. He will mix in kicks to the body and to the head, but the low kicks specifically I think could work a treat, because Breeden is heavy on that lead leg, and we have seen his leg hurt in previous fights. So I think Hernandez will be able to to just work Breeden on the feet, push him backwards a little bit and be a little bit more successful. I don't see Breeden being able to push Alexander Hernandez back and just start teeing off on him. But then Hernandez has got the equaliser of the wrestling. Now, from what I've seen, Breeden's takedown defense is okay, and when he is taken down, he will look to get back up to his feet straight away, which is a good sign. It's always a bad sign when you see a fighter accept a takedown, lay on the back, and, you know, just not look to get anything off in regards to looking to stand back up and just sitting in guard. But Breeden isn't like that. However, I just think Hernandez is a better wrestler. He's going to be a better grappler. If Breeden does decide to get back up to his feet quickly, I think Hernandez has got one of those wrestling styles where he can just keep a hold of him with a body lock against the cage and look to rinse and repeat. But that's if Hernandez decides to go to the wrestling. He might not. Either way, I think that the striking is much closer than the wrestling and the grappling, but I do still think that Alexander Hernandez is the better striker. He's obviously the better wrestler. I think he's the better grappler. I think his cardio will hold up better as well. Not that Breeden's got bad cardio, but I just think all the advantages lie with Alexander Hernandez, and that's the reason why he has been bet up to a -500 favourite and will likely continue to be bet up within the parlays and everything. So I think Hernandez is just a better mixed martial artist. I think it's a tough UFC debut for Mike Breeden, but he is a fighter that I can see winning fights in the UFC, so I'm sure he'll come back stronger after this fight. But as for the right here and right now, I'm picking Alexander Hernandez to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is a fight that I think is low-key flying under the radar. We've got Joe Solecki versus Jared Gordon. Solecki is currently the -135 favourite. The comeback on Gordon at +115 as the underdog. Now, as for where the value is on the betting line, I think the value sits slightly with the favourite in Joe Solecki at -135. I think that if he was up past -150, for example, I'm not sure the value would be on him then, and I think the value would slide over to Jared Gordon. But at the current betting line, I think Joe Solecki is rightfully there for a reason. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, it's interesting we talk about line movement because Joe Solecki did open at around -175. Jared Gordon was +145. All that money's coming on Jared Gordon, which I do agree with that trend in the line movement. It's closed the line up, and then that value from Gordon at +145 is now lost. And I do think the line will continue to close though. I think the line might get towards a pick'em if I'm being honest. I think by fight night on Saturday night, if we saw a -110 pick'em on either side, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Now, as for how this fight plays out, it's a really well-matched fight because both fighters are decent strikers. Joe Solecki's striking is improving. I do think I'd give Jared Gordon a very slight edge in the striking, but like I said, Joe Solecki's striking is looking sharper, is looking more crisp each time we see him. So I do think there's a focal focus on Joe Solecki's striking in camp, and we're seeing that every single time we see him back in the cage. So although I would give a slight striking edge to Jared Gordon, I think Joe Solecki is there or thereabouts, and maybe going to be coming into this fight good enough from a striking perspective to maybe make this fight super close on the feet. But where I think Joe Solecki is better than Jared Gordon is in the grappling. Now, it's weird because I think Jared Gordon might be the better wrestler in this fight, so Joe Solecki's got to be really careful on how he attempts the takedowns and what takedown attempts he decides to go for. So if he's looking to shoot a single leg or a double leg, I'm not quite sure that he's going to be able to complete those takedowns very easily against somebody like Gordon. Not that Gordon's a beast wrestler, but I just think those traditional wrestling styles lies with Gordon being the better wrestler in that respect. I think what Joe Solecki's got to do is he's big and strong, close the distance, get a hold of Jared Gordon, get double underhooks, a body lock, try and drag him down to the mat, and then work your jiu-jitsu from there, opposed to trying for the single legs and double legs. But I think Joe Solecki is capable of finding takedowns in this fight. I'm not quite sure right now exactly how they come for him, but I do think that the fight is going to have some solid extended periods of time on the mat, and I just really like Joe Solecki from a grappling perspective. Again, Jared Gordon's a good grappler. We've seen him being a good grappler. He's even good off his back in regards to reversing positions, getting back on top, and obviously he's got decent topside control as well. Now, that topside control is the only thing that worries me for Joe Solecki here, because against Jim Miller, Joe Solecki didn't really do anything off his back, and he lost his round, that first round, through inactivity of not doing anything from his back. However, there is a big difference between having Jim Miller on top of you than Jared Gordon, so I think Joe Solecki is a really tricky grappler. I think if he can get on top of Gordon, Gordon isn't going to be able to sweep or reverse adverse positions against Solecki. Trust me when I say Joe Solecki is a slick grappler. Now, I'm not saying that he gets Jared Gordon out of there, but I think if Joe Solecki gets on top in this fight, then Gordon is going to have problems trying to get back up to his feet. And like I say, I don't see him sweeping Solecki and getting on top of him. Getting back to his feet is probably Gordon's best option, but again, that's going to be difficult. I think we might see a couple of moments where Gordon's on top of Solecki, but I think if Solecki scrambles hard within the takedown attempts from Gordon, he'll be able to find his way on top. He's got a good magnet for top control, Joe Solecki has. So again, I think the fight's going to be won and lost in regards to what actually happens on the mat. I think we're going to see top control time, and I think that is going to be on the side of Joe Solecki, and for that reason, I'm going to pick Joe Solecki to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Antonina Shevchenko versus Casey O'Neill. Casey O'Neill is currently the -230 favourite. The comeback on Shevchenko at +190 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I do tend to think the value slightly sits with Antonina Shevchenko. I do understand why Casey O'Neill is the favourite in this fight from a stylistic perspective, but Antonina Shevchenko has stylistic advantages herself, and because of that, the line shouldn't be this wide. It should be much closer. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, I do think that we are going to see some fluctuation, but I think as we get into Saturday day before the fight start, I think we will see a stream of money coming in on Shevchenko. I'm not sure exactly how much, but it wouldn't shock me for Casey O'Neill to come into this fight roughly around -190, which should put Shevchenko roughly around the +165 region. Now, as for how this fight plays out, we've definitely got a clash of styles here. We've got Antonina Shevchenko that wants nothing more than to keep this fight vertical, and if she does keep this fight vertical, I do see a piece in Casey O'Neill up. I think Casey O'Neill is a prospect in the division, but I still think that she's in a rapid development process, and you can see her striking getting better from fight to fight, but she is predominantly a grappler. However, the striking is not going to be anywhere close to where it's going to be with Shevchenko. If she decides to stay on the feet for 15 minutes with Shevchenko, she loses this fight probably 8 or 9 times out of 10. Now, if Casey O'Neill can get her grappling going, which is where she is very good, get her wrestling going, take Shevchenko down, I think Shevchenko's going to have a lot of problems in this fight, because for as good as Shevchenko is on the feet, and for that gap in skill on the feet between Shevchenko and O'Neill, I think the gap in skill on the mat is quite identical, if I'm being honest. I think Casey O'Neill will absolutely roll all over Shevchenko if this fight hits the mat, and if Casey O'Neill gets on top, especially the longer the fight goes on. Casey O'Neill seems to be one of these fighters that grows into fights in a big way. She starts off a little bit slow, and this is where Antonina Shevchenko is going to have advantages here, because if she can get off to a good start in this fight, win round 1, then all she needs to do is win one of the latter 2 rounds to at least take the fight on the scorecards. But the fact that O'Neill really grows into fights, the fact that the wrestling and the grappling is a big advantage for her, and that's a real weakness and a hole in Antonina Shevchenko's game. I do think that the longer the fight goes on, the more Casey O'Neill will grow into the fight, the more she'll look for takedowns. I think she'll be able to get takedowns. I think she'll be able to get top control. I'm not quite sure that she gets Antonina Shevchenko out of there, although she has got a good submission game, so it's possible. But I think Shevchenko is going to have the good early moments in this fight. O'Neill's going to grow into the fight, get her takedowns in the second and the third round, and if she doesn't find that submission along the way, I think she'll be able to win the latter stages of the fight and take a win on the scorecards. For those reasons, I'm picking Casey O'Neill to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Karol Rosa versus Bethe Correia. Rosa is currently the -400 favourite. The comeback on Correia at +325 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I do think the value sits with Rosa at -400. I know the line's wide, I know it's a big line, but I think even if you want to include Rosa in a parlay, I think she's a relatively safe option in this spot. Safe, obviously, being that key word in regards to MMA, but I do think that Rosa's a rightful big favourite in this fight. I think she's got a lot of advantages, and like I say, if she was at -250, she'd just be bet up to -400 anyway. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, like I said, I think Rosa's going to be in a lot of parlays, and rightly so, and that's going to widen the betting line. I think she's going to come into this fight against Correia an even bigger favourite. I think she will be up at -450, potentially even -500 as well. Now, as for how this fight plays out, clearly, Karol Rosa's a big favourite for a reason. In regards to her striking, I think she's the better striker. In regards to the wrestling, I think Correia's actually not a bad wrestler, but I do think if Rosa wanted to get Correia down, she would be able to. And then on top, I think Rosa's more the dangerous grappler in this spot. Again, Correia's not a terrible grappler, but I do think, again, Rosa's just got advantages wherever this fight goes, and there's a reason that she's a 4-1 favourite in this fight. For me and people that have been listening to my analysis and my breakdowns for years, I've never been high on Bethe Correia. I've never been a fan of her style or her abilities, and I do think that she can get swallowed up a little bit in the UFC by the better fighters. And there are fights in the UFC that Correia can win, it's just she's never normally in those fights, unfortunately for her. And I think this is another one of those fights. She's obviously been talking about retirement. I think this might even be her last fight. I'm pretty sure her last fight she said she just wanted one more fight and then she was done, and she was looking for a fight potentially that she could win. And I don't think this is the fight that she's going to want to retire on, but retirement's in her mind anyway, which is never a good sign. Like I said, it just falls back to wherever this fight goes. I think Karol Rosa's better. I think she's the better striker. She's the better mover. She's quicker on the feet. She's more dangerous. She's got more power. I think she's going to set Correia back. I think she's going to make Correia look to shoot in on her as well. And if her striking is putting Correia on the back foot, the likelihood is Correia's shooting shots from too far out. Rosa shouldn't have any problem dealing with those and should just be able to put it on her. I think Rosa's live for a finish along the way, but if she doesn't, she should be able to win on the scorecards with not too many problems, relatively comfortable throughout. For those reasons, I'm picking Karol Rosa to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a bit of a low-key banger here as well. We've got Jamie Mullarkey versus Devonte Smith. Smith is currently the -152 favourite. The comeback on Mullarkey at +132 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I do think the value sits just about with Devonte Smith. The line's quite accurate though. It's another one of those accurately placed betting lines where there doesn't hold too much value, but if you are pushing me for which side is the better bet, I would say the -152 on Smith is the better bet than the +132 of Mullarkey. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, there's been some fluctuation here already. Devonte Smith was bet up to -165. I think he hit -170 at some books, but then the money's come back in on Jamie Mullarkey, so that -160, -165 seems to be a bit of a brick wall from a betting perspective for Smith, and once it hits that, naturally, money comes back in on the underdog. So I do think that the betting line settles roughly where it is right about now, and that's where Devonte Smith and Mullarkey are going to come into the cage on fight night on Saturday night. Now, as for how this fight plays out, Mullarkey's looked good since he's come into the UFC. He's a well-rounded fighter. He can aggressively strike. He's got good forward pressure. He's got decent wrestling, decent top control as well, although his top control can be a little loose when he's transitioning from position to position, which allows his opponents to either reverse sweep or stand back up to the feet. So I do think that Mullarkey is a well-rounded fighter. Now with Smith, he showed in his last fight he can wrestle and grapple as well, but predominantly he is a striker, a dangerous striker. He's quick on the feet, throws in combinations and throws heat in his strikes, and he's got raw knockout power. So that's something that Mullarkey's definitely going to have to be careful of. I think Mullarkey in this fight, it'd be wise for him to try and get his wrestling going, but I don't think Devonte Smith is just going to accept a relentless wrestling approach from his opponent in Mullarkey in this fight and just accept that throughout the fight. I think there's going to be some dangerous moments on the feet, and also if Smith starts this fight fast and starts hitting Mullarkey with some hard shots, I'm not necessarily saying Mullarkey's going to get knocked out, because he's proven that he's durable as well and that he can take damage and he's got heart and toughness. But I do think that if Smith starts cracking him hard early, it's going to get a lot of respect from Mullarkey at that point. And what that's going to do is just cause some hesitancy in Mullarkey's aggressive nature and his offense when it comes to his striking. And that's going to put him on the back foot, and it's going to allow Devonte Smith to move forwards and start to really get his strikes going, throwing combinations and just giving himself the upper hand. If Devonte Smith can dictate the pace and the range of this fight, then I think that it's a really good fight for him. But the thing is, Mullarkey's gritty, is ugly, and the way of his fighting is that dirty style of grinding fights, you know, clinching up against the cage and just making things not clean. And that type of fight is going to cause a problem for Smith if Mullarkey can get it going. But ultimately what I can see in this fight is I think Mullarkey is going to try and make this fight dirty, ugly and gritty like I've mentioned. But I think when he gets into range, I think Devonte Smith's just going to unload on 2 to 3 punch combinations, but hard punches that that's either going to hurt Mullarkey, knock him out, or, like I say, just get enough respect for Mullarkey just to back off a little bit. Mullarkey's definitely going to have his moments in this fight. He might even steal a round, but I think it would have to be one of the early rounds for him to steal if he wants to give himself a good chance of winning this fight, because if Smith gets off to a good start, which I think he will, then he will either finish Mullarkey or he should be able to bank rounds 1 and 2. And if he starts falling off a cliff in regards to his cardio when Mullarkey builds into the fight, Mullarkey might win the latter stages of the fight, again if he's not knocked out, but it might be a little too late to do anything in regards to trying to get a win at that point. I think Smith's got advantages in this fight in regards to his power, his athleticism and his boxing, and that should be enough to get him over the line, whether that's a finish or a win on the scorecard. So for those reasons, I'm picking Devonte Smith to win this fight. And in the next fight, this could be a fun one as well from a striking perspective. We've got Douglas Andrade versus Gaetano Pirrello. Andrade is currently the minus 245 favourite. The comeback on Pirrello at plus 205 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I think the value slightly sits with Douglas Andrade at minus 245. If it was up at minus 265, minus 275, again, I could probably understand that as well, and that's why I do think that there's slight value on Andrade at the current betting line. As for where the line moves throughout fight week, we're going to see fluctuation here because I do think the line's settled where it is. But again, I think people will throw Andrade into parlays with him being only minus 245 when there's a few other bigger favourites on the card. So I do think he'll be in parlays. That should widen the betting line. But if it does get too crazy, I think people will take a dog shot on Pirrello. Again, after analysing the fight and looking at it from a stylistic perspective. So I think it's going to fluctuate. Ultimately, I think Andrade is going to enter this fight around a minus 250 favourite, with Pirrello being around plus 210. Now, as for how this fight plays out, I think there's going to be some aggressive moments on the feet. Pirrello, in all fairness to him, he had the pretty much worst matchup you could possibly have in this division for your UFC debut against Ricky Simón. You know, that fight's not going to go well for you most of the time, and it didn't for Pirrello. He was a striker. Simón, a good wrestler, a relentless wrestler. Simón also showed that he'd improved his striking as well, but ultimately it was the wrestling, it was the grappling, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the top control time that ended up winning him that fight. And like I said, it was a nightmare UFC debut for Pirrello. But Pirrello is a striker predominantly, so this fight is going to be a little better for him. He's going to have a fighter in front of him, an opponent in front of him that's going to want to strike for extended periods of time. He never had that against Ricky Simón, so Pirrello's going to have opportunities and moments in this fight to potentially get Andrade out of there or just put a stamp on the fight, maybe steal a round along the way. But the thing is with Andrade is a little ball of energy himself. He's a good aggressive striker that will normally put his opponents on the back foot. Andrade can be a little bit hittable. You know, he's not 100% defensively responsible. He can be got at. That's got to be a worry for Andrade. He's got to recognise danger coming back at him, because if he's coming forward recklessly and wild, then it's only going to take a good counter shot from Pirrello to hurt Andrade or potentially finish him, or just at least get respect from Andrade and cause a little bit of hesitancy when he's coming forward wild. But outside of that, coming forwards aggressively and getting clipped, I do think Andrade's going to have some success in this fight. He mixes things up well on the feet. He'll throw low kicks with combinations, and with him having UFC experience, that is going to count in this fight. He has fought some really good fighters in his UFC career, so again, I think Andrade is just going to have good moments on the feet. But if it does start getting a little bit sketchy for Andrade can just level change and take Pirrello down. That seems to be a weakness and a hole in Pirello's game, and it actually wouldn't shock me if Andrade had a wrestling heavy game plan ahead of this fight just to make things simple for him, because I do think that Andrade can wrestle. He's got decent top control as well, and I think he can get Pirrello down if he wants him. So this is where I see why Andrade is a minus 245 favourite in this spot. I think he's got a couple of paths to victory. If plan A doesn't work, I think he can fall back on a plan B, and that should be enough to get him over the line and get him a win in this fight. For those reasons, I'm picking Douglas Andrade to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Shanna Young versus Stephanie Egger. Egger is currently the minus 122 favourite. The comeback on Young, the plus 102 slight underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I think the value sits with the slight favourite in Egger at minus 122. I think the line could possibly be a little bit wider and it'd be fair, but at minus 122, I do think the value sits with Egger. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, the line movement here has been really interesting because Stephanie Egger actually opened up the plus 130 underdog at Bet Online with Shanna Young at minus 150. all that money's come in on Egger to the point where it's not just closed up to a pick 'em, but it's flipped the line as well. And I do think there will be constantly money coming in on Egger throughout fight week unless it starts getting a little bit ridiculous. I think if Egger gets to -135, -140, then money will naturally come back in on Young on the other side. But I do think Egger's going to come into this fight roughly around -125, -130, with the comeback on Young around +105, +110. Now, as for how this fight plays out, it's a clash of styles again. You know, we've got a lot of them on this card on Saturday night, but we've got Egger, who is a grappler. She will definitely want to get this fight on the mat. That's where she does her best work. Whereas Shanna Young, she's got a good all-round game, but I don't think her grappling matches up to Stephanie Egger's in this fight. And for that reason, I think Shanna Young will be preparing to keep this fight vertical, and that's where she should hold advantages over Stephanie Egger. The thing is with Egger, she's quite relentless with trying to get the fight to the mat if she wants the fight to go there. And I think on the feet, unless Egger has stepped up in regards to her improvements, I think Shanna Young will be the better striker, and that's only going to force Egger to get that wrestling going so she can take the fight to the mat, where she's likely going to have strong advantages herself. And I think Egger can get this fight to the mat. I think she will be able to take Shanna Young down, and I think that's the reason why we've seen the line movement we have and the trend that's caused the line to not only close to a pick-em but to flip and put Egger as a slight favourite. I think Egger will have moments in this fight where she is getting a little bit stuck on the feet, but eventually she will be able to get the fight to the mat, in my opinion. I think she's going to be able to do that for at least 2 out of the 3 rounds. If she doesn't submit Shanna Young or finish her along the way, I think she'll be able to bank 2 out of the 3 rounds and win on the scorecards should it go there. I think Shanna Young will have moments herself, like I said, on the feet. I think she will have moments doing good work, but if she is doing good work, the better work she does, the more likely it is that Egger's just going to turn a little bit more determined to get the fight to the mat, and I think she will be successful in doing that, and it's for those reasons I'm picking Stephanie Egger to win this fight. And in the final breakdown of this card, next up we've got Alejandro Perez versus the returning Johnny Eduardo. Perez is currently the -230 favourite with the comeback on Johnny Eduardo at +190 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I think the value sits with the favourite in Alejandro Perez at -230. Johnny Eduardo, I'll talk about this more soon, but Eduardo, he's coming back after 3 years out. He's 43 years old, which is absolutely insane to think about. So with the age, the potential decline, and the fact that he's been out for 3 years as well, in front of a fast-moving, explosive Alejandro Perez, I do think Eduardo's going to have problems, and that's why Perez, in my opinion, is the rightful favourite and the value side as well. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, I do think that the money is going to come in on Alejandro Perez. There has been a little trend of Johnny Eduardo money coming in. I'm not sure I quite agree with that, but I do think that the betting line will widen the closer we get to fight night. I don't think it'll go crazy, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Perez come into the fight on Saturday night roughly around a -275 favourite. Now, as for how this fight plays out, like I said, there's a lot of concerns and red flags from Johnny Eduardo's perspective, but credit to him, because for a 43-year-old bantamweight, he is in phenomenal shape. He doesn't look 43 years old at all, but you can tell that he's been in there a lot and he's fought a lot over the years, and he's got a lot of miles on the clock as well. And honestly, it's just not going to help him in this spot. From Perez's perspective, he is on a 2-fight losing streak. He hasn't fought for a couple of years himself, but the 2 losses in that 2-fight losing streak have come to Cody Stamann and Song Yadong, which there's no shame in losing to any of those fighters. Both of those fighters are really good, really tough. So for Perez, he had 2 bad stylistic fights previously. I think he's got a good stylistic fight here. From Johnny Eduardo's perspective, he likes to stand and strike, but he's a good grappler when the fight hits the mat. So for me, Eduardo should be shooting takedowns here, but that's just not his game. He does like to stand and strike. I think Perez is going to be the faster mover here. He's going to be more erratic, lateral movement, in and out of range really well, dictating the pace and the range of the fight, which is really important. And I do have question marks in regards to Eduardo's durability as well, especially as he's getting up in age. And like I said, you can tell he's got a bit of a decline going on, miles on the clock, and he hasn't fought for 3 years, so there's likely going to be some ring rust there as well. I just think it's a bad fight for him. I think that Perez is going to land a lot of volume in this fight. He's going to have a lot of success, like I said, in and out of range, landing strikes. He might be able to mix in some takedowns along the way. It wouldn't shock me if he finished Eduardo either, but if the fight does hit the scorecards, I fully expect Perez to take at least 2 out of the 3 rounds, and I think he's going to have a lot of success wherever this fight goes. So that's the reason why I'm picking Alejandro Perez to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of On the Moneyline. I hope you all enjoyed it, and as always, fight fans, I'd appreciate all likes to the video and subscriptions to our MMA Play 365 YouTube channel too. If I've ever helped you win a bet and win some money with my analysis and predictions, then please hit that like and subscribe button to the channel. Remember, you can get all the betting advice you'll ever need over at MMAplay365.com. We cater for long-term gamblers that like to build their own bets and strategies, gamblers that just want to follow exactly what I bet on, and we also cater for you fun gamblers that like the long shot fun parlays or ACCAs, accumulators as we call them in the UK. Even if you only want our best value underdog for the event, which comes with a money back guarantee by the way, we have plenty of different packages and subscription options for you guys to choose from, which also includes our DFS packages for DraftKings and FanDuel as well. All of our subscriptions are at very affordable prices. Just hop onto MMAplay365.com and see what's best for you. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you at the next event.